The moment Olivia Turner opened her mouth at the county assessor's office in Santa Fe, New Mexico Territory, on a sweltering August morning in 1882, she knew her employment was about to end, but the truth had always mattered more to her than keeping silent for a paycheck. "Mr. Henderson, these ledgers show discrepancies that cannot be ignored," she said, standing before his mahogany desk with her spine straight and her voice unwavering. "You've been recording property values at half their actual worth for your brother's holdings, while inflating the assessments for the Hispanic landowners on the east side of town. It's dishonest, and I won't be party to it any longer." The portly man behind the desk turned crimson, his jowls quivering with indignation. "Miss Turner, you overstep your bounds. You were hired to copy figures, not to question the decisions of your superiors." "I was hired to maintain accurate records," Olivia countered, her dark hair pinned severely back from a face that might have been considered handsome if not for the perpetual furrow of concern between her brows. "And these records are anything but accurate. They're fraudulent." That word hung in the air like gunsmoke. Mr. Henderson rose slowly from his chair, his considerable bulk casting a shadow across the morning light streaming through the window. "You are dismissed, Miss Turner, effective immediately. Gather your things and leave these premises. And I'll make certain that no reputable business in Santa Fe will hire you after I spread word of your insubordinate nature and wild accusations." Olivia had expected this outcome, but hearing the words still sent a chill through her despite the August heat. She was 23 years old, unmarried, and had no family in the territory to fall back on. Her parents had died of fever 3 years prior during the journey west, and her only brother had been killed in a mining accident in Colorado before that. She had precisely $17 to her name, and paid weekly rent on a small room above the millinery shop on San Francisco Street. "I stand by what I said," she replied quietly, collecting the few personal items from her desk: a tin of pencils she had purchased herself, a small photograph of her mother in a tarnished frame, and a book of poetry that had belonged to her father. "Good day, Mr. Henderson." She walked out into the blazing sunlight of the plaza, her practical gray dress already beginning to stick to her back in the heat. The town square bustled with the usual late-morning activity, wagons rolling past, horses tied at hitching posts, women with parasols doing their shopping, and men conducting business in the shade of the portal. Santa Fe was a strange blend of old Spanish colonial charm and new American ambition, adobe buildings alongside wooden storefronts, and cultures mixing in ways both harmonious and contentious. Olivia made her way back to her rented room, her mind already calculating how long her meager savings would last. 2 weeks, perhaps 3 if she ate sparingly. She would need to find new employment immediately, but Henderson's threat wasn't idle. Santa Fe was small enough that his influence reached far, and being labeled as troublesome or insubordinate would make finding respectable work nearly impossible. Over the next week, Olivia proved this assessment correct. She applied at the general store, the hotel, 2 restaurants, and even the laundry. Each time, she saw the same pattern: initial interest upon seeing her neat handwriting and hearing her education, followed by a conversation with someone, usually Henderson himself or one of his associates, and then a cold rejection. "I'm sorry, Miss Turner, but we've decided to promote from within," the hotel manager told her, not meeting her eyes. "We don't need additional help after all," said the owner of the general store, despite the notice in his window still advertising for a clerk. On the 8th day after her dismissal, with her funds dwindling to less than $10, Olivia sat in her small room and allowed herself the luxury of despair for exactly 10 minutes. She let tears run down her cheeks as she contemplated the impossible situation. She could not afford the stagecoach fare to another town. She had no family to appeal to for help. Her landlady, Mrs. Chen, a Chinese widow who had shown Olivia kindness, would soon require the rent payment Olivia could not make. When the 10 minutes elapsed, Olivia dried her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and decided that if respectable employment was closed to her, she would find unrespectable employment. She would wash dishes, scrub floors, take in mending, anything to keep a roof over her head while she figured out her next move. The cantina on the south side of town was called La Rosa Roja, and its proprietor, a formidable woman named Senora Martinez, looked Olivia up and down with shrewd dark eyes when she entered through the back door that afternoon. "You want work?" Senora Martinez asked in accented English. "You don't look like cantina girl." "I'm not," Olivia said firmly. "But I can wash dishes, clean floors, help in the kitchen. I'm a hard worker and I'm desperate. I can start immediately and work for whatever you think is fair." Something in Olivia's direct manner seemed to appeal to the older woman. "You are the one who told off Henderson, yes. Word travels fast in Santa Fe. He is a pig, that one. Always trying to cheat my husband before he died, rest his soul. You can start tonight. Kitchen work, cleaning. I pay you 50 cents a day, plus you can eat one meal. You work hard, no complaints." "Thank you," Olivia said, relief flooding through her. "You won't regret this." "I already regret many things," Senora Martinez said with a wave of her hand. "One more will not matter. Be here at 4 o'clock. We get busy when the sun goes down." That evening, Olivia found herself in the steamy kitchen of La Rosa Roja, washing dishes in water so hot it turned her hands red, while the sounds of music and laughter and occasional arguments filtered in from the main room. It was hard, humble work, but she attacked it with the same diligence she had brought to her clerical position. She would not let pride prevent her from surviving. She had been working there for 3 nights when she first saw Ethan Davies. She was carrying a bucket of dirty water through the back hallway to dump in the yard when a commotion in the cantina made her pause. Through the doorway, she could see a tall man standing at the bar, his weathered face calm despite being surrounded by 3 aggressive drunks who were clearly spoiling for a fight. "I said that's my seat, Cowboy," one of the drunks slurred, shoving at the tall man's shoulder. The cowboy, for that's clearly what he was from his dusty chaps, worn boots and the pistol sitting easy on his hip, didn't move or react with anger. "I apologize," he said in a deep, measured voice. "I didn't realize the seat was claimed. I'll be happy to move once I finish my drink." "You'll move now," another drunk demanded, this one reaching for the cowboy's arm. What happened next occurred so quickly that Olivia almost missed it. The cowboy shifted his weight, caught the reaching arm, and somehow redirected the drunk's own momentum so that the man stumbled and sat down hard on the floor, more surprised than hurt. The other 2 drunks hesitated, suddenly less certain, and in that moment of hesitation, Senora Martinez appeared with her heavy wooden club. "Out," she commanded, pointing at the drunks. "All of you out now. You cause trouble in my place, you don't come back." The drunks shuffled out, muttering but not willing to challenge Senora Martinez's authority. The cowboy remained at the bar, calmly lifting his glass of whiskey to his lips as though nothing had happened. Olivia found herself staring at his profile, taking in the strong line of his jaw shadowed with several days of beard growth, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar, the capable hands resting on the bar, scarred and calloused from hard work. "Back to work," Senora Martinez said sharply, and Olivia realized she was still standing in the doorway with her bucket. She hurried outside, dumped the water, and returned to the kitchen, but the image of the calm cowboy stayed with her. She saw him again 2 nights later, sitting at a corner table with a plate of Señora Martinez's chili Colorado and tortillas. He ate slowly, methodically, like a man who had learned not to take food for granted. Olivia was wiping down tables after the evening rush had subsided when she heard raised voices near the bar. "That's a lie, and you know it." A woman's voice rang out. It was Carmen, one of the cantina girls who served drinks and danced with customers. "You promised me $3 for the night, and now you're trying to pay half. You weren't worth $3, sweetheart," a well-dressed merchant said with an ugly laugh. "Barely worth the $1.50 I'm offering." Before Olivia could think better of it, she stepped forward. "I saw you negotiate with her," she said clearly. "You agreed to $3. I was standing right there when you shook hands on it." This was not entirely true. Olivia had been in the kitchen at the time, but she knew Carmen, a young woman with a small child to support, and she knew the type of man who would cheat a working woman out of her agreed wages. The merchant turned to look at Olivia with narrowed eyes. "Who asked you?" "Get back to your scrubbing, kitchen girl. Pay her what you promised," Olivia said, not backing down despite the contempt in his voice. "It's the honest thing to do." "The honest thing," the merchant laughed. "You're telling me about honesty in a cantina, that's rich." "Honesty matters everywhere," Olivia replied. "Or should businessmen be exempt from keeping their word?" The merchant's face darkened. "You've got a smart mouth. Someone should teach you to keep it shut." He took a step toward Olivia, and she held her ground even as her heart hammered in her chest. But before he could reach her, the tall cowboy was suddenly there, not aggressive, not threatening, simply standing between them with his considerable height and calm presence. "The lady raises a good point," he said in that deep, unhurried voice. "If you agreed to $3, seems like $3 is what you owe. A man's word should mean something, even in a cantina." The merchant looked up at the cowboy, seemed to calculate his chances, and evidently decided the matter wasn't worth the potential cost. He threw $3 silver on the bar with excessive force, making them ring against the wood. "Take your money," he said to Carmen. "But I won't be back to this establishment." "Good," Señora Martinez said from behind the bar. "We don't need customers who cheat." The merchant stormed out, and the normal sounds of the cantina gradually resumed. Carmen grabbed the coins and gave Olivia a quick, grateful smile before disappearing upstairs. The cowboy turned to look at Olivia for the first time, and she found herself meeting eyes that were a striking light brown, almost amber in the lamplight. "That was either very brave or very foolish," he said, and there might have been the hint of a smile around his mouth. "Probably foolish," Olivia admitted, "but I can't abide cheating. It's wrong whether it's done in a fancy office or a cantina." "Your honesty refreshes me," the cowboy said, and this time he definitely smiled, transforming his weather-beaten face into something approaching handsome. "Not many people speak up for what's right when it might cost them something. I'm Ethan Davies." "Olivia Turner," she replied, feeling suddenly awkward in her stained apron with her hair falling loose from its pins. "I should get back to work." "Course," Ethan said, stepping aside. But as she moved past him, he added, "Thank you for speaking up. World needs more people willing to do that." Olivia carried those words back to the kitchen like a gift. After a week of feeling worthless and cast aside, of scrubbing floors and washing dishes while the education and skills she had worked so hard to acquire went to waste, those simple words of appreciation meant more than she could have expressed. Over the following weeks, Ethan became a regular presence at La Rosa Roja. He came in 3 or 4 evenings a week, always polite, always quiet, ordering a simple meal and a single whiskey. Olivia learned from the gossip of the cantina girls that he worked at the Double D Ranch about 15 miles outside of town, that he was the foreman there, and that he was considered one of the best horsemen in the territory. He was 28 years old, had fought in the Lincoln County Range Wars on the side of the law, and was known as a fair man, hard but just. He never takes advantage, Carmen told Olivia one evening when they were cleaning up together. Some of the cowboys, they drink too much and get rough, or they promise things they don't mean. But not Davies. He's always respectful, a gentleman, even if he is just a cowboy. Olivia found herself watching for Ethan's arrivals, timing her movements so she might pass his table while he ate, hoping he might speak to her again. She told herself she was being foolish, that a ranch foreman would have no interest in a disgraced clerk who now washed dishes for a living. But she couldn't help the way her pulse quickened when she saw him, or the way his presence made the cantina seem somehow more bearable. It was on a particularly difficult evening that they spoke again. One of the kitchen girls had failed to show up for work, leaving Olivia to handle both the dishes and some of the serving. She was exhausted, her feet aching and her back sore, when she brought a plate to Ethan's table. Her hands were shaking with fatigue, and as she set the plate down, it tilted, sending beans sliding dangerously close to the edge. Ethan's hand shot out, steadying the plate with casual grace. "Easy there," he said gently. "You all right, Miss Turner?" The kindness in his voice, coming at the end of such a long, hard day, nearly undid her. She blinked against sudden tears and managed a nod. "Just tired. I'm sorry about the plate." "Nothing to apologize for," Ethan said. "You're working yourself to the bone. When's the last time you sat down?" "I'll sit when the work is done," Olivia replied, trying to regain her composure. "Sit now," Ethan said, and it wasn't a command but an invitation. He pulled out the chair across from him. "Just for a minute, rest your feet." "That's not a request, Miss Turner. It's a prescription from someone who knows what it's like to push too hard." Olivia glanced around the cantina. It was a slower evening, and Senora Martinez was occupied with inventory. She made a decision and sank into the chair, the relief so intense she couldn't suppress a small sigh. "Thank you," she said quietly. "How'd you end up here?" Ethan asked, his voice casual but his eyes intent. "You don't seem like the usual type for cantina work." Perhaps it was the exhaustion, or perhaps it was the genuine interest in his face, but Olivia found herself telling him the whole story. She spoke of her position at the assessor's office, of discovering the fraud, of her confrontation with Henderson and the subsequent blacklisting that had left her unable to find respectable work. "So you sacrificed your livelihood for honesty," Ethan said when she finished. "That takes courage." "Or stupidity," Olivia said with a bitter laugh. "I'm washing dishes and scrubbing floors when I could have kept silent and kept my position. What did my honesty accomplish? Henderson is still cheating people. I just made myself unemployable in the process." "You kept your integrity," Ethan said firmly. "That's worth something, maybe worth more than you realize right now." "Integrity doesn't pay rent," Olivia replied, then immediately regretted the self-pitying tone. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to complain. I'm grateful to have any work at all." Ethan was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "You said you kept records, did bookkeeping?" "Yes. I can write a fine hand, manage ledgers, do calculations. I helped with correspondence as well, but none of that matters now. No one will hire me for that kind of work anymore." "I might know someone who would," Ethan said slowly. "The Double D Ranch where I work. The owner, Mr. Dawson, his wife used to manage the household accounts and correspondence, but she died 2 years back. Since then, it's been chaos." Mr. Dawson tries to keep up with it, but he's a cattleman, not a clerk. Papers pile up, bills don't get paid on time, orders get confused. We need someone organized who can handle that side of things. Olivia's heart leaped with hope, then immediately sank. Mr. Dawson would hear about me from Henderson. Everyone in Santa Fe knows I'm trouble. Mr. Dawson doesn't give a damn what Henderson thinks, Ethan said with the first hint of humor she'd heard from him. Henderson tried to undervalue the ranch for tax purposes. Mr. Dawson caught him and raised hell about it. They haven't spoken civilly since. If anything, the fact that you stood up to Henderson would work in your favor. You really think he might hire me? Olivia asked, hardly daring to believe it. I can ask him, Ethan said. Can't promise anything, but I can ask. Would you be willing to live out at the ranch? It's 15 miles from town. You'd have your own quarters, room and board included, plus wages, but you'd be pretty isolated. I'll take isolated over washing dishes, Olivia said immediately, then caught herself. I mean, I'm grateful for the work here, but if there's a chance to use my actual skills again to do something meaningful, yes. Yes, I would be very interested. Ethan nodded. I'll talk to him tomorrow. Come out to the ranch day after tomorrow around midday. Ask anyone for directions to the Double D. I'll let them know at the gate to expect you. Thank you, Olivia said, her voice thick with gratitude. You don't know what this means to me, Mr. Davies. Ethan, he corrected gently. And I think I do know, Miss Turner. Everyone deserves a chance to prove their worth, especially people who have the courage to stand up for what's right. 2 days later, Olivia borrowed a horse from Senora Martinez, who surprised her by not only lending the animal but also refusing to accept Olivia's final day of wages. You go to something better, the older woman said, pressing coins into Olivia's hand instead. You are too smart for my kitchen. Go and be who you are meant to be. The ride out to the Double D Ranch took nearly 2 hours. The landscape stretched out in all directions, high desert country with pinon and juniper dotting the rolling hills, mountains rising in the purple distance. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way, and Olivia found herself breathing deeper, sitting straighter in the saddle as the town fell behind her. The ranch itself was larger than she had expected, a sprawling operation with multiple outbuildings, extensive corrals, and a main house that was solid and practical rather than fancy. As she rode through the gate, a ranch hand directed her to the main house, where Ethan was waiting on the porch. He looked different in full daylight, she thought. The lines around his eyes were deeper, carved by years of squinting into sun and wind. His hands were strong and capable as he helped her dismount, his touch brief but steady. Mr. Dawson is waiting inside, he said. Just be yourself. Tell him the truth, same as you told me. What if he doesn't like the truth? Olivia asked, only half joking. Then he's a fool, Ethan said simply. But he's not, come on. James Dawson was a barrel-chested man in his 60s with iron-gray hair and eyes that looked like they had seen everything and been surprised by none of it. He sat behind a desk absolutely buried in papers, and when Olivia entered, he gestured at the chaos with something between frustration and resignation. This, he said without preamble, is a disaster. Ethan tells me you can make sense of such things. I'm skeptical but desperate enough to try. What do you see when you look at this? Olivia stepped closer to the desk, her practiced eye scanning the jumbled papers. Bills of sale, supplier invoices, correspondence about a disputed water right, a notice about a cattle auction, several bank statements that don't appear to have been reconciled, and at least 3 letters that should have been answered weeks ago. She looked up at Mr. Dawson. With your permission, I could have this organized and prioritized within a few hours. You can read my handwriting. Mr. Dawson asked, pulling out a sheet covered in nearly illegible scrawl. Olivia took it, studied it for a moment, then said, "This is a list of supplies needed for the spring roundup. You need 300 feet of rope, 50 pounds of nails, 2 barrels of salt pork, coffee, beans, flour, and you've noted here that the chuck wagon needs a new wheel." Mr. Dawson's eyebrows rose. "Ethan said you were sharp. He wasn't exaggerating. All right, Miss Turner, I'll lay it out plain. I need someone to manage the ranch accounts, handle correspondence, keep track of orders and deliveries, and generally make sure that the business side of this operation runs smoothly. I can run cattle and manage men, but paperwork defeats me. My wife used to handle it, but she's gone now, and I'm drowning. The position pays $30 a month, room and board included. You'd have a cabin to yourself, take your meals in the main house when you want, or fix them in your own place. You'd work closely with me and with Ethan, since he manages the day-to-day operations. What I need to know is whether Ethan is right about you, or whether you're the troublemaking termagant that Henderson claims." "I won't lie to you, Mr. Dawson," Olivia said, meeting his eyes steadily. "I did exactly what Henderson says I did. I confronted him about fraudulent record keeping. I stand by that decision. If standing up for honesty makes me a troublemaker, then I suppose I am one. But I'm also a hard worker. I'm skilled at what I do, and I promise you that if you hire me, your records will be accurate, and your business affairs will be conducted with integrity." A slow smile spread across Mr. Dawson's weathered face. "Henderson is a corrupt snake who tried to cheat me on my taxes. The fact that you stood up to him tells me you've got backbone. You're hired, Miss Turner. When can you start?" "Today," Olivia said immediately. "Right now, if you'd like." "That's what I like to hear," Mr. Dawson said, standing and extending his hand. "Welcome to the Double D, Miss Turner. Ethan, show her to the cabin and get her settled. Miss Turner, take this afternoon to get your bearings. You can start fresh tomorrow morning." The cabin Ethan showed her to was small but clean. One room with a bed, a table and chair, a small stove, and hooks on the wall for hanging clothes. It was simple, but it was hers, more privacy and space than she'd had since arriving in Santa Fe. "It's perfect," she said, setting down the small bag that held all her possessions. "There's a pump outside for water," Ethan said, standing in the doorway. "Meals are served in the main house at 6 in the morning, noon, and 6 in the evening, but you're welcome to skip any of them and fix your own food here if you prefer. The outhouse is just behind the cabin, and there's a bathhouse near the bunkhouse that the men use, but you're welcome to heat water on your stove if you'd rather bathe here." "Thank you," Olivia said, then turned to face him fully. "Thank you for this, Ethan. For giving me a chance when no one else would." "I didn't give you anything," Ethan said. "You earned this with your skills and your character. I just made an introduction. The rest was all you." He paused, his expression turning thoughtful. "But I am glad you're here. It'll be good to have someone around who values honesty. That's rarer than it should be." Over the following weeks, Olivia threw herself into her work with an enthusiasm born of genuine relief. She organized Mr. Dawson's chaotic papers, created systems for tracking expenses and income, caught up on neglected correspondence, and even discovered that a supplier had been overcharging them for grain by nearly 20%. When she presented this finding to Mr. Dawson with careful documentation, he laughed with delight. "Henderson said you were too outspoken," he told her. "What he meant was you're too honest for his crooked tastes. You just saved this ranch several $100s, Miss Turner. Good work." The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Olivia woke early, often walking out to watch the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold before starting her work. She managed the ranch's business affairs from a small office that had been set up for her in the main house, her neat handwriting filling ledgers with precise figures, her carefully worded letters maintaining the ranch's business relationships. But the best part of her days were the moments when Ethan would stop by, often dusty and tired from working cattle, to discuss ranch business. He would lean against the doorframe of her office, his hat in his hands, and talk through upcoming expenses or concerns about supply orders. These conversations gradually expanded to include other topics: books they had both read, places they had been, dreams they had deferred. "I always wanted to see the ocean," Olivia admitted one evening as they sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set. This had become something of a habit, these evening conversations after the work was done. "I've read about it, but I can't imagine what it must be like to see all that water stretching to the horizon." "I saw it once," Ethan said, "when I was younger before I came to New Mexico. Worked on a ranch in California for a couple years. The ocean is something else. Bigger than the sky, it seems like. And the sound of it, the waves coming in, it's like breathing, like the world itself is breathing." "That sounds beautiful," Olivia said wistfully. "It was," Ethan agreed. "But so is this." He gestured at the landscape before them, the desert turning lavender in the dying light. "Different beauty, but just as real. I think beauty is where you find it and who you find it with." Something in his voice when he said those last words made Olivia's heart skip. She glanced at him and found him already looking at her, his expression open in a way she hadn't seen before. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility, and then Mr. Dawson called from inside the house, breaking the spell. "Ethan, need you to look at something." Ethan stood with what might have been reluctance. "Duty calls," he said lightly, but his eyes lingered on Olivia's face for a moment longer before he turned away. That night, lying in her small bed in her cabin, Olivia admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny for weeks. She was falling in love with Ethan Davies. It was foolish, perhaps, and certainly complicated by their working relationship, but it was true nonetheless. She loved his quiet strength, his fairness with the ranch hands, the way he treated everyone with respect regardless of their station. She loved the way he listened when she spoke, really listened as though her words mattered. She loved his honesty, the way he said what he meant without games or pretense. But did he feel the same? That moment on the porch had suggested he might, but Olivia had been wrong about such things before. Better to say nothing, she decided, than to risk the comfortable friendship they had built. Autumn came to New Mexico with cooler nights and golden aspens in the mountain canyons. The ranch prepared for winter, laying in supplies and moving cattle to lower pastures. Olivia had been at the Double D for 3 months and felt more at home than she had anywhere since her parents' death. The work fulfilled her, using her skills and her mind in ways that felt meaningful. Mr. Dawson had even given her a raise after she had successfully negotiated a better price on a large supply contract. It was a bright October morning when trouble arrived in the form of Charles Henderson himself. Olivia was in her office when she heard the commotion in the yard, raised voices that brought her to the window. Henderson sat on a fine bay horse, flanked by 2 rough-looking men, facing Mr. Dawson and Ethan. "I'm here on official business," Henderson was saying, his voice carrying clearly. "There's a question about your property boundaries, Dawson. The territorial surveyor needs to verify your lines before we can process your tax assessment." "My boundaries are exactly where they've always been," Mr. Dawson said flatly. "And we both know this has nothing to do with any survey and everything to do with you trying to stir up trouble." "I'm just doing my job," Henderson said with false pleasantness. "Surely you don't object to a simple verification, unless you've got something to hide." Olivia felt anger rise in her chest. Henderson was clearly trying to harass Mr. Dawson, likely as revenge for hiring her. She didn't think, just acted, walking out of the house and across the yard to stand beside Mr. Dawson. "Mr. Henderson," she said calmly, though her heart was pounding. "What a surprise to see you here. I trust you've been keeping better records since I left your employ. I'd hate to think the county's business affairs are still being mismanaged." Henderson's face darkened when he saw her. "Miss Turner, I should have known you'd be at the center of this. Poisoning Dawson against proper authority, no doubt." "I haven't poisoned anyone," Olivia replied. "I simply do my job with honesty and accuracy. You might consider trying it sometime." "You watch your tongue," one of Henderson's men said, moving his horse forward in what was clearly meant to be an intimidating gesture. Ethan stepped smoothly between the man's horse and Olivia, his hand resting casually on his pistol. "I'd think real carefully about your next move," he said quietly, and something in his voice made the man pull his horse up short. "This isn't over, Dawson," Henderson said, yanking his horse's head around. "I'll be back with the surveyor and we'll see what irregularities we find." He rode out with his men, and Olivia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Mr. Dawson turned to her with concern in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Miss Turner. I didn't realize Henderson would bring his grudge out here." "It's not your fault," Olivia said. "And I won't be intimidated by him. Let him bring his surveyor. Our records are in perfect order." "Damn right they are," Mr. Dawson said with satisfaction. "Best they've ever been. But still, I don't like him threatening you." "He's not threatening her," Ethan said, his voice carrying an edge Olivia had never heard before. "Because if he tries, he'll answer to me." The protectiveness in those words sent warmth through Olivia, even as she tried to maintain her composure. "I can handle Henderson," she said. "I know you can," Ethan replied, finally looking at her. "But you shouldn't have to handle him alone." Henderson did return 3 days later with a surveyor, a nervous little man who clearly wanted no part of whatever game Henderson was playing. The surveyor spent 2 days carefully measuring the ranch boundaries and checking them against the original land grant documents that Olivia had meticulously organized and filed. In the end, he declared that everything was in perfect order and that the double Deticus property lines were exactly where they should be. Henderson left in a fury, and Olivia allowed herself to feel a moment of triumph. She had not only kept her integrity, but also proved her worth. Henderson's attempts to punish her for her honesty had failed. That evening, Ethan found her in the barn, where she had gone to visit the mare she had been learning to ride. He leaned against the stall door, watching as she stroked the horse's velvet nose. "You did good today," he said. Standing up to Henderson again, that took courage. "Or stupidity," Olivia said with a slight smile echoing their old conversation. "I haven't quite figured out which." "It's courage," Ethan said firmly. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "Olivia, I need to tell you something." The use of her first name, which he had been doing more frequently in recent weeks, still sent a small thrill through her. She turned to face him, giving him her full attention. "When I first saw you in the cantina," Ethan said, his words coming slowly as though he was choosing them with care, "I thought you were the bravest person I'd seen in a long time. Speaking up for Carmen like that, knowing it might cost you something. And then when I learned your whole story, about how you'd sacrificed your position for honesty, I was impressed. But I told myself it was just respect for your character, nothing more." He paused, and Olivia's heart was hammering so hard she was certain he must be able to hear it. "But it's more than respect," Ethan continued, meeting her eyes. "These past months, getting to know you, watching you work, talking with you in the evenings, I've come to care for you. More than I probably should, given that we work together and I'm supposed to be professional, but I can't help it. You're smart and brave and honest, and you make me want to be better than I am. And I needed you to know that, even if you don't feel the same way." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I feel the same way. I've been falling in love with you since that first night when you told me my honesty refreshed you. No one had ever said anything like that to me before. No one had ever valued me for the very thing that everyone else wanted me to suppress." Ethan's face transformed with a smile so genuine and joyful that it took her breath away. He stepped forward, reaching out to cup her face gently in his calloused hands. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and the fact that he asked, that he requested permission rather than simply taking what he wanted, made her love him even more. "Yes," she breathed, and then his lips were on hers, gentle at first and then deeper as she responded, her arms coming up to circle his neck. The kiss tasted like hope and new beginnings, like honesty and trust, like coming home to a place she hadn't known she was searching for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I don't have much to offer you," he said quietly. "I'm just a ranch foreman. I've got some money saved and I'm good at what I do, but I'm not a wealthy man." "I don't need wealth," Olivia said firmly. "I need honesty and kindness and respect. I need someone who sees me as I am and doesn't want me to be different. You've already given me that." "Then I'll keep giving it to you," Ethan promised. "Every day for the rest of my life if you'll have me." "Is that a proposal?" Olivia asked, half laughing, half crying. "Not yet," Ethan said with a smile. "When I propose, I'll do it proper, but it's a promise. A promise that I love you, Olivia Turner, and I intend to court you with every intention of making you my wife if you'll allow it." "I'll allow it," Olivia said, pulling him down for another kiss. "I'll more than allow it." They courted over the winter, a season of cold nights and warm affection, of stolen kisses in the barn and long conversations by the fire in the main house, with Mr. Dawson playing a benevolent chaperone who was clearly delighted by the romance developing under his roof. Ethan was everything Olivia could have hoped for in a partner: respectful, affectionate, honest, and deeply committed to building a life together. He proposed on Christmas Eve, presenting her with a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. They were standing outside her cabin, snow falling softly around them, and when he dropped to one knee in the snow, Olivia didn't even let him finish the question before she said yes. They were married in early spring of 1883 in Santa Fe, in a small ceremony at the old church on the plaza. Senora Martinez came and cried happy tears. Mr. Dawson gave Olivia away and looked proud as a father. Even the ranch hands cleaned up and attended, these rough men offering genuine good wishes to the couple. Henderson was not invited, but Olivia heard later that he had been forced to resign his position after an investigation into his record-keeping practices. Someone, she never learned who, had filed a formal complaint with the territorial governor, complete with detailed documentation of the fraud Olivia had originally discovered. Justice, it seemed, had eventually prevailed. After the wedding, Ethan and Olivia moved into a new cabin that Mr. Dawson had built for them as a wedding present, larger than Olivia's old quarters, with 2 rooms and real glass windows. Olivia continued to manage the ranch's business affairs, and Ethan continued as foreman. But now, they came home to each other every evening, sharing meals and dreams and the deep contentment of being truly known and loved. Their first child, a son they named Thomas after Olivia's father, was born in the winter of 1884. Olivia had been terrified during the pregnancy, remembering her mother's difficult deliveries, but the doctor from Santa Fe and a midwife from a nearby ranch saw her safely through. When she held her son for the first time and saw Ethan's face as he looked at his child, Olivia thought her heart might burst from the joy of it. Thomas was a sturdy baby who grew into a curious toddler, constantly exploring the ranch under the watchful eyes of his parents. A daughter, Emma, followed 2 years later, and then another son, William, 2 years after that. The cabin grew crowded with the noise and chaos of family life, and Olivia had never been happier. Mr. Dawson, growing older and more content to let Ethan handle the daily operations, began to talk about retirement. One evening when Thomas was 5, Emma 3, and William just learning to walk, Mr. Dawson called Ethan and Olivia to the main house. "I've been thinking," he said, settling into his favorite chair. "I've got no children of my own, and this ranch has been my life's work. I don't want it sold off to strangers when I'm gone. I want it to go to people who love it and will care for it properly. I want you two to have it." Olivia and Ethan exchanged stunned looks. "Mr. Dawson," Ethan said carefully, "we couldn't possibly accept such a gift." "It's not a gift, it's good sense," Mr. Dawson said firmly. "You've been running this place for years now, Ethan. And Olivia's business management has made us more profitable than we've ever been. The Double D is as much yours as it is mine. I'm having my lawyer draw up papers to make it official. When I die, the ranch goes to you, free and clear. And in the meantime, I'm making you full partners." "It's already decided." Tears ran down Olivia's cheeks as she crossed the room to embrace the old man. "Thank you," she whispered. "You've given us so much. A home, a future, a family." "You earned it," Mr. Dawson said gruffly, patting her back. "Both of you. Now stop crying and let's have some of that apple pie you made. I'm an old man and I need my dessert." Mr. Dawson lived for 5 more years, long enough to see Thomas start his schooling, to bounce Emma and William on his knee, and to meet the 4th grandchild, a daughter named Caroline. He passed peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1891, and Ethan and Olivia mourned him deeply, grateful for every year they had been given with the man who had offered Olivia a chance when no one else would. The Double D Ranch prospered under their joint management. Ethan's skill with cattle and horses, combined with Olivia's business acumen, made them formidable. They expanded the operation, buying adjacent land when it became available, improving their breeding stock, and developing a reputation for fair dealing that made other ranchers eager to do business with them. But their greatest success was their family. Thomas grew into a serious young man who loved working with the cattle. Emma was bright and outspoken, reminding Olivia so much of herself that it was sometimes startling. William had his father's quiet strength and natural gift with horses. Caroline was still young, but already showed signs of being the most stubborn of them all. On a warm evening in the summer of 1895, Olivia and Ethan sat on the porch of the main house, which had become their home after Mr. Dawson's death. The children were asleep inside, finally settled after a long day of activity. The desert sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "You ever regret it?" Olivia asked, her hand in Ethan's. "The way we started?" "All that trouble with Henderson." Ethan turned to look at her, his face lined now with the years and the weather, but his eyes still that striking amber, still looking at her with the same love and respect he had shown from the beginning. "Not for a single moment," he said firmly. "That trouble brought you to me. Your honesty, your courage, your refusal to compromise your integrity even when it cost you everything, those are the things I love most about you. I wouldn't change any of it." "I was so lost when you found me," Olivia said softly. "Washing dishes in a cantina, convinced I had ruined my life by speaking the truth." "You weren't lost," Ethan corrected gently. You were exactly where you needed to be to find your way. And I didn't find you, Olivia, we found each other. Two people who believed honesty mattered, who weren't willing to compromise their principles for convenience. We recognized each other, that's all. Your honesty refreshes me, Olivia quoted with a smile, remembering that first real conversation. That's what you said to me. And I meant it then, and I mean it now, Ethan said, lifting her hand to kiss it. Every day with you has been a gift, Olivia Davies. Every single day. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sound of one of the children stirring, and Olivia started to rise, but the child settled again and she relaxed back into her chair. I'm proud of us, she said after a while. Proud of what we've built here, not just the ranch, but our family, our life. We've created something good, something honest. Our children are growing up knowing that integrity matters, that speaking the truth is worth something even when it's difficult. Thomas told me yesterday that one of the other boys at school was cheating on his work, Ethan said. He said he didn't want to tell tales, but he also didn't want to let it pass because it wasn't right. He asked me what he should do. What did you tell him? Olivia asked. I told him to speak to the boy privately first, give him a chance to do the right thing on his own. But if that didn't work, to speak to the teacher. I told him that honesty isn't always easy, but it's always right, and that his mother and I would be proud of him for standing up for what's fair, no matter what anyone else thought. Perfect answer, Olivia said, squeezing his hand. You're a good father, Ethan. We're good parents, Ethan corrected. Together, we're better together than we could ever be apart. As the night deepened and the desert cooled, they eventually went inside to their own bed, to their own room in the house that was truly theirs. And as Olivia drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, she thought about the strange path her life had taken. From that hot August morning when she had been dismissed for being too outspoken, through the difficult days at the cantina, to the moment a cowboy had recognized and valued her honesty, to this. A full and happy life, children sleeping safely under her roof, a partner who loved and respected her, and work that fulfilled her. She had paid a price for her integrity, but she had received so much more in return. Not just material success, though the ranch certainly provided that, but something more valuable. A life lived honestly, in partnership with someone who shared her values, raising children who would carry those same principles forward into the next generation. Years continued to pass, bringing the changes that time always brings. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread and brought her to the Double D to work alongside him. Emma went east to study at a women's college, scandalizing some of the more traditional families in Santa Fe, but making her parents fiercely proud. William discovered a talent for training horses and developed a breeding program that brought buyers from across the territory. Caroline grew into a young woman as outspoken as her mother, already showing signs that she would challenge any injustice she encountered. Olivia and Ethan grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies marked by years of hard work and desert sun, but their love deepening with each passing season. They had arguments, of course, as any couple does, but they never lost the fundamental respect and honesty that had drawn them together. When they disagreed, they said so plainly, worked through it, and moved forward together. In 1905, when Olivia was 46 and Ethan 51, they sat on that same porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Thomas's wife had given them two boys, sturdy little fellows already fascinated by cattle. Emma had come home from the East with a husband, a lawyer who shared her passion for justice, and they had a daughter who looked just like Emma had at that age. 22 years married, Ethan said, his arm around Olivia's shoulders. "Who would have thought that night in the cantina would lead to all this?" "I think I knew," Olivia said softly. "The moment you said my honesty refreshed you, I think I knew you were different, that you might be the person I had been waiting for." "I definitely knew," Ethan said with a laugh. "Watching you stand up to that merchant, putting yourself at risk to defend someone else, I knew right then that you were special, that you were someone I wanted to know better." "So you manipulated Mr. Dawson into hiring me," Olivia teased. "I suggested to Mr. Dawson that he might consider interviewing you," Ethan corrected with mock dignity. "The rest was all you. You got that job on your own merits, just like everything else you've accomplished." One of the grandchildren ran up to the porch, Thomas's eldest boy, named James after Mr. Dawson. "Grandma, Grandma, I found a lizard. Come see." Olivia rose with a smile, letting her grandson drag her down to see his discovery while Ethan watched with contentment. This, he thought, was what he had fought for in those range wars years ago before he met Olivia. Not just land or water rights or property, but the chance to build something lasting. A family, a legacy, a piece of the world where honesty and hard work were valued. As the sun set on another day at the Double D Ranch, as children's laughter echoed across the yard, and the smell of dinner drifted from the kitchen, Ethan sent a silent thank you to whatever fate had brought Olivia Turner to Santa Fe, had given her the courage to speak truth to power, and had led her, eventually, to him. The years rolled on, bringing new challenges and new joys. The turn of the century brought changes to New Mexico territory, with talk of statehood and modernization. Automobiles appeared on the streets of Santa Fe, telephone lines stretched across the desert, and the old ways slowly gave way to the new. But the Double D Ranch remained, adapting where necessary but holding fast to the values that had built it: honesty, hard work, and integrity. In 1912, when New Mexico finally achieved statehood, Ethan and Olivia traveled to Santa Fe for the celebration. They walked through the plaza where Olivia had once applied desperately for work, where she had been turned away again and again because of Henderson's blacklisting. They passed the building that had housed the assessor's office, long since converted to other purposes, and Olivia felt no regret, only gratitude for the path her life had taken. "I was so scared that day I confronted Henderson," she told Ethan as they strolled arm in arm through the familiar streets. "I knew it would cost me my job, probably my reputation, but I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't be part of his fraud." "That strength, that commitment to doing what's right even when it's hard, that's what I've always loved most about you," Ethan said. "You've taught our children the same thing, and they're teaching their children. That's a legacy worth more than any amount of land or money." They returned to the ranch the next day, to the home they had built together, and settled back into the comfortable rhythms of their life. They were in their 50s now, no longer young but not yet old, with the satisfaction of seeing their life's work flourishing. The Double D was one of the most successful ranches in the state, known for quality cattle, fine horses, and business practices that were scrupulously honest. Emma's husband had become a state legislator, fighting for reforms that would protect small landowners from the kind of fraud Henderson had once practiced. Thomas and his wife had expanded the cattle operation and were experimenting with new breeding techniques. William's horses were sought after across the Southwest, and Caroline, youngest of their children, had become a teacher, educating a new generation in the schoolhouse that had been built on land donated by the ranch. In the spring of 1918, Olivia celebrated her 59th birthday surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. As she looked around the crowded main house at the family that had grown from that chance meeting in a Santa Fe cantina, 36 years earlier, she felt profound gratitude, not just for the material success they had achieved, but for the love and respect that had sustained them through hard times and good. That evening, after the celebration had ended and the guests had departed, Olivia and Ethan walked out to the spot where he had proposed to her all those years ago. Her old cabin was still there, now used for storage, but the memories it held were vivid. "You remember when I first moved in there?" Olivia asked, leaning against her husband. "How small and bare it seemed, but how grateful I was to have it. To have a place that was mine, work that mattered, and hope for the future." "I remember," Ethan said. "I also remember thinking that I wanted to give you so much more than a bare cabin and a job managing paperwork. I wanted to give you the world." "You gave me better than the world," Olivia said, turning to face him. "You gave me respect. You gave me love. You gave me a partnership where I could be fully myself, where my honesty and my opinions were valued rather than suppressed. You gave me a family and a home and a life beyond anything I could have imagined that day I was dismissed from the assessor's office. You gave me everything that matters." Ethan pulled her close, and even after decades of marriage, Olivia still felt that same flutter of joy she had felt at his first kiss. "We gave each other everything that matters," he corrected gently. "That's what love is, Olivia. Not one person giving to another, but two people building something together that's better than either could create alone." They stood together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in the brilliant colors that never failed to move them. And as darkness fell and stars emerged in the vast New Mexico sky, they walked back to the main house hand in hand. Two people who had found each other against unlikely odds and built a life of meaning and purpose. The seasons continued their eternal cycle, spring to summer to fall to winter and back again. Olivia and Ethan grew older. Their children matured into middle age, and their grandchildren began to have families of their own. The Double D Ranch continued to thrive, generation following generation in the work of raising cattle and horses, managing the land with care and honesty. In the summer of 1925, Ethan fell ill. It started as a cough he couldn't shake, then developed into pneumonia. The doctors came from Santa Fe, but there was little they could do. Olivia nursed him through it, sitting by his bedside day and night, holding his hand and remembering their life together. "Don't look so worried," Ethan told her one afternoon when he was having a good day. His voice was weak, but his eyes were clear. "We've had 42 years together, Olivia. Some people don't get 42 days of real love. We've been blessed." "I'm not ready to lose you," Olivia said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to be in this world without you." "You'll do what you've always done," Ethan said, reaching up to touch her cheek. "You'll face it with courage and honesty. You'll take care of our family. You'll keep the ranch going. You're the strongest person I've ever known, Olivia. You'll be all right." "Will I?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Yes," he said with certainty. "Because I taught you that your strength isn't in being unafraid. It's in being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. Just like you did when you confronted Henderson. Just like you did when you walked into that cantina looking for work. Just like you've done every single day we've been together. You know how to stand up and keep going, Olivia. It's who you are." He recovered from that illness, rallying enough to join the family for Christmas that year. But the pneumonia had weakened him, and the following spring he caught it again. This time, there was no recovery. Ethan Davies died on a warm May morning with Olivia holding his hand, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, leaving this world as he had lived in it, with dignity, courage, and surrounded by love. Olivia mourned him deeply. For weeks after his death, she moved through her days mechanically, fulfilling her obligations but feeling hollow inside. The ranch still needed managing, the family still needed her, but everything felt muted and gray without Ethan beside her. It was Thomas who finally brought her back to herself. He found her one afternoon sitting in the barn where she and Ethan had shared their first kiss, tears running silently down her weathered face. "He wouldn't want this, Mama," Thomas said gently, sitting beside her. "He wouldn't want you giving up." "I'm not giving up," Olivia protested. "I'm just—" "You're grieving," Thomas said. "And that's right and natural. But you're also retreating, and that's not who you are. You taught us that standing up for what's right, speaking the truth even when it's hard, that's what matters. Well, the truth is that the ranch still needs you. We still need you. And if you let grief consume you, if you stop being who you are, then that's a lie. That's pretending the woman you've always been doesn't exist anymore. And you didn't raise us to accept lies, not even comforting ones." Olivia looked at her son, seeing so much of Ethan in his face, but also seeing himself, the man he had become. "When did you get so wise?" she asked with a watery smile. "I learned from the best," Thomas replied. "From a father who valued honesty and a mother who had the courage to stand up for it, even when it cost her everything. You gave up your job and your reputation to do what was right, Mama. Don't give up yourself now. Papa would want you to keep living, keep fighting, keep being the woman he fell in love with." Those words reached her when nothing else had. Thomas was right. Ethan had loved her strength, her honesty, her refusal to compromise her principles. Letting grief turn her into a shadow of herself would dishonor his memory. She owed him better than that. She owed herself better than that. From that day forward, Olivia began to truly live again. She still missed Ethan with an ache that never entirely faded, but she threw herself back into running the ranch, into caring for her family, into being who she had always been. She was 67 years old when Ethan died, and she had many years ahead of her. She was determined to make them count. She took over more of the direct management of the ranch, working closely with Thomas and William on expanding their operations. She became known throughout New Mexico as a formidable businesswoman, tough but fair, whose word was as good as gold. Young ranchers came to her for advice, and she gave it freely, always emphasizing the same principles. Work hard, deal honestly, and never compromise your integrity for short-term gain. Emma's husband, the legislator, consulted with her on agricultural policy. "Your mother is one of the sharpest minds in the state," he told Emma. "She understands both the practical realities of ranching and the economic principles that govern it. More than that, she's honest. She'll tell me when a policy won't work, even if it's something I want to hear." "That's Mama," Emma said with pride. "She's never known how to be anything but honest." Olivia lived to see the Great Depression and watched her ranch weather the crisis better than most because of the conservative, honest financial practices she had always insisted upon. She lived to see automobiles completely replace horses for transportation, though the Double D still raised horses for work and pleasure. She lived to see her great-grandchildren grow into adults and start families of their own. On her 80th birthday in 1936, the family threw a massive celebration at the ranch. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren came from across New Mexico and beyond, filling the main house and spilling out into the yard. There were people there who had worked for the ranch over the years, neighbors whose families had known the Davies for generations, business associates who had learned to trust Olivia's word implicitly. As Olivia sat in the place of honor and looked out at the crowd, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From an orphaned clerk in Santa Fe to the matriarch of one of the most successful and respected ranching families in New Mexico, it had been a long and sometimes difficult road. But it had also been rich with meaning, purpose, and love. Emma stood to give a toast, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. My mother taught me that honesty matters more than comfort, that integrity is worth fighting for, and that standing up for what's right is always worthwhile, even when it costs you something. She's lived those principles every single day of her life. When she was young, she lost her job for refusing to participate in fraud. That choice led her to my father, to this ranch, to all of us. It led her to build something lasting and meaningful. So I want to toast not just to my mother's birthday, but to her courage, her honesty, and the legacy she's created. To Olivia Davies, a woman who showed us all what it means to live with integrity. To Olivia, the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. Later that evening, after most of the guests had departed, Olivia sat on her porch with her children and closest grandchildren, watching the sun set behind the familiar mountains. Caroline's daughter, a bright young woman named Ruth, sat at her feet, looking up at her great-grandmother with curiosity. "Grandma Olivia, is it true you once worked in a cantina washing dishes?" Ruth asked. "That's what my mother says, but it seems strange." "It's absolutely true," Olivia confirmed with a smile. "I washed dishes and scrubbed floors at La Rosa Roja for several weeks when I first came to New Mexico." "But why?" Ruth asked, clearly puzzled. "You're so successful now. Why were you doing such humble work?" "Because I had been dismissed from my job for telling the truth," Olivia explained. "And no one else would hire me, so I took the only work I could find. I'm not ashamed of it, Ruth. That time taught me that there's dignity in honest work, no matter how humble. And more importantly, it taught me that staying true to yourself, speaking honestly even when it costs you something, that's what really matters." "Is that how you met great-grandpa Ethan?" Ruth asked. "It is," Olivia said, her voice softening as it always did when she spoke of her husband. "He came into that cantina, and he saw me stand up for someone who was being cheated. And instead of thinking I was trouble, instead of believing the rumors that I was difficult and outspoken, he saw my honesty and valued it. He told me that my honesty refreshed him. Those words changed my life." "I wish I could have known him," Ruth said wistfully. She was too young to remember Ethan, who had died before she was born. "He would have loved you," Olivia assured her. "He loved all of you, even the ones he never got to meet. This ranch, this family, it was everything to him. And he built it on the same principles I try to live by: honesty, hard work, and treating people with respect. If you remember nothing else about your great-grandfather, remember that." As the stars emerged in the darkening sky, Olivia thought about Ethan and the life they had built together. She thought about that young woman she had been, fired for speaking the truth, desperate for work, convinced she had ruined her life. She thought about the cowboy who had seen her value, who had recognized her strength and loved her for it. And she thought about the words that had started it all: "Your honesty refreshes me." Such simple words, but they had opened the door to everything that followed. They had led to love, to partnership, to family, to this ranch and this legacy. They had led to a life lived with integrity, where she had never had to compromise who she was or what she believed in. Olivia Davies lived for 5 more years after that birthday celebration, remaining sharp and active until near the end. She died in the spring of 1941 at the age of 82, passing peacefully in her sleep in the house she and Ethan had shared for so many years. By the time of her death, the Double D Ranch was one of the most respected operations in New Mexico, and the Davies name was synonymous with integrity and fair dealing. At her funeral, held in the same Santa Fe church where she and Ethan had been married nearly 60 years earlier, Emma stood to deliver the eulogy. She spoke of her mother's courage in confronting fraud even when it cost her everything. She spoke of the honesty that had defined Olivia's life, the way she had taught her children and grandchildren that integrity mattered more than convenience. And she spoke of the love story that had begun in a cantina, when a cowboy had recognized and valued the very quality that others had condemned. "My father used to say that he fell in love with my mother the moment he saw her stand up for what was right," Emma said, her voice steady despite her tears. He said her honesty refreshed him, that in a world full of people who said what was convenient, my mother said what was true. And that honesty, that commitment to truth and integrity, shaped everything our family became. We're all here today because one woman had the courage to speak the truth, and one man had the wisdom to value it. That's my mother's legacy, and it's one we'll carry forward for generations to come. The Double D Ranch continued under the management of Thomas and his sons, and later their sons after them. Through economic depressions and world wars, through droughts and hard times, the ranch endured, built on the solid foundation of honest dealing and hard work that Olivia and Ethan had established. And in the ranch office, carefully preserved in a frame, hung a small placard with words that had become the family motto: "Your honesty refreshes me." Those words, spoken by a cowboy to a dismissed clerk in 1882, had led to a love that spanned 4 decades, a family that flourished for generations, and a legacy of integrity that outlasted them both. It was, all things considered, not a bad return on the simple investment of telling the truth. And so the story that began with a dismissal ended with a triumph, proving that sometimes the thing that the world condemns you for, the quality that gets you dismissed and blacklisted and rejected, is precisely the thing that leads you to your destiny. Olivia Turner had been dismissed for being too outspoken, for her inconvenient honesty, for refusing to participate in fraud. But that dismissal had led her to Ethan Davies, to a life of meaning and purpose, to a love that sustained her through decades, and to a legacy that would endure long after she was gone. Her honesty had indeed refreshed more than just one cowboy. It had refreshed a whole family, a whole community, showing by example that integrity matters, that speaking the truth is worthwhile, and that staying true to yourself, even when it costs you everything, can lead to rewards beyond imagining. The wild frontier of New Mexico territory had been tamed not just by cowboys and cattle, but by people like Olivia and Ethan, who brought civilization not through violence but through honor, who built lasting institutions on foundations of trust and honesty. Their story became part of the family lore, passed down from generation to generation. Great-grandchildren who had never known Olivia or Ethan nevertheless grew up hearing about the clerk who stood up to corruption, the cowboy who valued honesty, and the love that bloomed between them. And many of those descendants, facing their own moments of choice, their own temptations to compromise their principles for convenience, remembered the story and found the courage to speak the truth, to do the right thing, to be honest even when it cost them something. Because in the end, Olivia and Ethan had proven something important. That honesty does matter, that integrity is worth fighting for, and that staying true to yourself leads not to ruin but to redemption. Their love story wasn't just about romance, though there was plenty of that. It was about recognition, about two people seeing and valuing the best in each other, about building something lasting on a foundation of truth and respect. And on warm spring evenings at the Double D Ranch, when the sun sets behind the mountains and the desert comes alive with the sounds of night, you can almost feel their presence still. Two people whose love and integrity shaped a family and a legacy that endures to this day. The Wild West may have passed into history, but the values they stood for, the honest love they shared that remains eternal, a testament to the power of speaking truth and the rewards that come to those who refuse to compromise their principles. Their story reminds us all that being dismissed for your honesty is not the end, but perhaps the beginning. That sometimes losing everything opens the door to gaining more than you ever imagined. And that when you meet someone who says, "Your honesty refreshes me," you found something rare and precious. A person who sees you, truly sees you, and loves you not in spite of who you are but because of it. That, in the end, is the greatest love story of all.